This is Andrea with Parking Lot Debrief. All right, I'm here with Seth Field and Rachel Gary. Um, as I've said, I'm just tapping into people I know, so y'all reach out if y'all want to talk about something because I'm gonna run out of friends. I'm gonna run out of people who know people. But these are people who know people, but I know Seth from a while back. I knew Rachel-ish from somewhere in time. But we've got a couple educational interpreters who hopefully today we can share a bit more of like practical, hands-on, what y'all do that people can take away with. Because I know you guys are good at your job. So, again, always prefacing with these are just two human beings. They do not have their PhD. Even if they did, it doesn't matter. They're just people who do the work every day, and hopefully people feel validated and go, "Oh my gosh, I'd do that too," or "Oh, what a great idea." Um, yeah. So I'll hand it over to Rachel first, I guess, to just give us a short bio or whatever you feel like sharing.
Okay, yeah. Hello, my name is Rachel Gary. I am a K-12 interpreter. I also work in the education setting in colleges as well. So I do
Mm.
all the way from K to college. And then I work as a freelance interpreter as well in the community. Right now, I'm kind of going more into medical work. So that's been interesting to say the least.
Nice. Yeah. Seth.
My name is Seth Field. I am also a K-12 interpreter. I work in West Michigan. I did also do some college work too. It was really fun. I miss it. But yeah, I think this is my 14th year doing it.
I was gonna say you've been
And
doing it for a while.
yeah, it's adding up. And then this I think is my 5th year as an immersion classroom interpreter.
Nice. And you get to work with your friends.
It's so great. It's
Isn't
so
that the
great. Like
best?
it's honestly, it's totally worth it. It's one of the best parts about my job is working with a whole huge group of friends.
Mhm.
Which, as interpreters, we can relate when we get to see the one person, the friends we get to work with, and like, man, it makes all the difference. All the
Mm.
difference.
Oh, for sure.
Um,
Like Seth and I made it through PD this week just by sitting next to each other and giggling.
yes,
Yeah, yeah,
yes.
Very
100%.
We need that.
respectfully, but
Right. But we need those people. Oh, and I feel like interpreters, K-12 does get kind of open that space to where you get to see the same people and kind of actually make relationships and friends. Freelance life is free. You get freedom, but man, it's lonely sometimes. So I sometimes envy that about educational interpreting relationships.
Yeah, yeah. When you have a really positive culture in your building, it shows not just like within your mental health, your own wanting to go to work, but it shows out in your work as well. Like your interpretations are usually a little bit more comfortable because you could be vulnerable.
Yes.
And there are some folks out there, I'm sure, that don't feel that way. I've been in classrooms before where I didn't get along with a gen ed teacher, and that's tough.
Right.
It's only one year. I hope that you have a support group that you
It's
can bounce off
uncomfortable
of.
though. Ugh.
It is. It is, and it makes such a big difference when you have people like Rachel who I can laugh with on a regular basis. You know.
Yes. Oh, it's
yeah.
the best. And it makes you not want to leave.
Mhm.
Um, I guess I'll start us off with we wrote a handful of notes here of like what the new concept, at least I'd say in the last 5, 10, maybe years, more so recently of like what really is the role of an educational interpreter? Oh, it is different than community, which we always knew, but we never really pinpointed it. And now more conversations of language deprivation, of all of these other things, so many more layers have been added. Um, but yeah, just the idea of what the interpreter's role is in educational interpreting. What do you want to say to that?
Rachel.
Well, I guess I will say I didn't say how long I've been
Yeah, yeah.
working as the educational interpreter. It'll be 3 years in December. So I'm a little bit newer than Seth. So I did get out of the ITP or the, interpreter training program kind of recently, like back in 2022. And I don't really remember talking about language deprivation
Oh,
at all.
no. And that's
I
what?
want to say
When
at
did you
all, but
graduate? Less than 5 years ago?
2022, I graduated.
Oh, and that
Yeah.
wasn't even talked about then.
Right.
in
And
the
it might have
program.
been touched on a little bit, but it wasn't anything that was necessarily emphasized. And my program was focused on the BEI. So coming
Right.
out, I didn't have, other than myself going through and taking the EIPA written and performance, kind of knowing what that might look like, but then coming into the schools, right? It's even more different than some people might think, especially with language deprivation being, very pervasive amongst deaf children and deaf people.
Yeah, and like the newness that kind of surrounds this the recognition is really uncomfortable, I think, for a lot of people who've been doing this for a long time, myself
Yes.
included sometimes, like I don't have a really clear example of something where I was like, I don't know, like I don't know if that's like if that adds up. But
Right.
but the I've been kind of surprised because when I graduated from the ITP, like the rule was is that interpreters eat their young and you go through a crash course and the people that are around you, if there are any people around you, I know that we have some people who kind of interpret on islands throughout the US,
Yeah.
but the people around you kind of shape you into the to whatever the department is or whatever the educational philosophy of that programming is. And I see a lot more people kind of saying no, like I
Yes.
I don't agree with the educational philosophy that our program has, or why don't we take like the programming that you're offering, the resources you're offering, and change them in order
Yeah.
to, better accommodate for the student. And there is a lot of vague areas in the interpreter role that aren't quite caught up to maybe some of these new attitudes. And
Yeah.
so it can be misleading. It can be really misleading for new interpreters, I'm sure. I mean, I don't know if you experienced that, Rachel, where it was like I feel like I learned a whole bunch of stuff, and I graduated, I'm ready to work, and then I come to a new place, I get hired into a new job, and they're like, "Well, here's how we
Don't
do it."
do anything you learned.
Yes,
Right.
yes,
Right. We do it different.
yeah,
Yeah, I feel like I was lucky on two fronts, right? I came in kind of fresh and ready. I'm always kind of like ready to
Yep.
learn, ready to pick up new stuff and ready to adapt. Whereas I could see, as other interpreters might be just like content and happy with where they're at and used to what they're used to. And that's valid in its own way as well. And, the other piece of it is that um, I had a huge support system coming in. Like Seth and I are very lucky and fortunate to have such a large support group. And I know a lot of people don't have that. So I think that kind of allowed me to better adapt faster to this new paradigm, even for me. It wasn't even a change in paradigm because I had no idea at all to begin with coming in.
Right.
Um, that really helped me to kind of orient myself. But however, I started out, with older kids when I started working at the schools, and then even last year coming into the elementary school was just a giant learning curve for me.
Hmm.
And I've learned so much, and it kind of really does take that adaptability to the student and to the program and to, the people around you in order to be successful and make sure everybody gets what they need.
yeah,
And a lot of
agree.
people are on their islands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
They're lucky that we have this podcast, like
Hey,
just to talk about these sorts of things because it's like, well, I don't have anything to bounce ideas off of.
right.
I want to try something new and different, but I don't know, one, if it's going to be successful, two, if it's ethical or in the best interest of a student, three, if they're going to even let me do it on an institutional level. And so, like the immersion based philosophy that is specifically oriented towards confronting student, not confronting, um, I guess mitigating students who have severe to moderate language deprivation. You know, mitigating their language needs is kind of a new idea. It's kind of different, and I'm sure that there's somebody out there who's listening. There's going to be like, oh, I want to try that, and it's going to be great. I think anyway. Or they're going to try it. It's going to be total failure, and then they can come back and they can tell me I'm a jerk.
That's
You
right.
know,
You leave
yeah,
comments.
Yeah.
Seth Field.
yeah.
I'm just joking. No,
Seth Field's a dumbass. Yeah, just say it right out. It's fine. I get it all the time. No worries.
but like we're speaking at a 30,000 foot view right now of like, well, things are a little bit different and people may have an attitude that, and we can get right into like, well, what does that even mean? What does that look like? And you mentioned immersion classroom. Um, not pointing to myself, not an educational interpreter anymore. I was for a brief second. Mainstream classroom, one, probably only one, maybe two deaf kids in a classroom full of hearing students. There's deaf programs that have multiple deaf students that go out to gen ed classes and all that. I know the word self-contained, but like give me what you mean by immersion classroom and what is your role then, even knowing everyone that many of you all in these situations are not in this immersion classroom, but there's many tools that can be taken. So what does it mean?
So, the way that we run the immersion-based classroom is essentially like we hear in the ITP often that students who are deaf and hard of hearing don't receive any sort of language instruction directly until they enter school. They might have early on programs if you're lucky. There might be some language tutors available, but the hard fact is that um, neurotypical hearing children hear like up to 4 million words by the time they're 4 years old, or 3 million
Mm,
words by the time they're 4 years old, which
mm,
means that they have an increased level of incidental hearing when they enter the school system. And so our students don't have that.
right.
Our students have sometimes nothing, sometimes let's say 1,000 signs when they come in if we're lucky.
Mhm.
So the immersion-based classroom is designed to immerse a student in their native language, which is ASL. And so everybody who works in the classroom is either a native user, an interpreter, or a teacher of the deaf. And there is very limited speaking allowed. So like the limited speaking means that like if we have a student who's hard of hearing but still has moderate to mild language deprivation, we ask that they speak while they sign, which,
Mm.
in a way increases fluency. But all in all, the idea is to immerse our students in ASL all day, every day. And we utilize that ASL foundation in order to teach them English, reading, writing, um, mathematics. And my role looks different depending on what is going on. A lot of times I will take some of I will tutor students actively in things that they have been exposed to in the gen ed setting, but do it in an instructional sort of role that models all of the language connected to said core content. And then I also interpret for whoever can't sign who comes in the room. So we have a lot of frequent tours, we have building administrators, we have teachers who kind of come in and out all day, every day. And so I jump up and interpret for them. I interpret for videos that do not have closed captioning and also videos that have closed captioning because a lot of
Right.
our students' reading fluency is not up to par. But I do things like that. Like I run a weekly 30-minute station with the kids where we learn how to do closed captioning and how to slow it
Mm.
down, what different words mean, how to navigate, I guess, YouTube, but so that they have the most amount of access and that they're familiarized with it. Um, when it comes to things like writing and reading in English, like I've taken and passed the TEPs, so I have a test of English proficiency in my state, and so I feel comfortable saying, okay, well, these are words that like you can use in you know uh, in English. This means
Mhm.
6 different things. But we also have deaf people present in the classroom, and whenever there's a sign question that comes up, we always defer to the deaf person. We make sure that the kids know that they can defer to the deaf person, and we also teach them a lot about how to use an interpreter in the gen ed settings. So
Yeah.
it's a huge spectrum of different sort of things that I provide. And I know that there's probably a lot of interpreters that are like, well, that's not what an interpreter does. And we can get more into that later. But um, I'm like, well, I think that that's what we should do. And it is outlined in the EIPA, like standard practice papers that we're allowed to tutor and language model and do a lot of different things and with some fairly vague language. So I
Right.
feel comfortable doing it. I think that a lot of other people should do it if you have the students, if you have the resources, if you have the support to do it. But anyway, uh,
And I'm just saying
Rachel,
that would be something that maybe someone who's been trained in a certain way or has done this for 35 years or that may bristle at and be like, ooh, not, and not be willing to make that change. And you say many interpreters may not do this, but they may like and
yeah,
feel bad about it or feel a feeling about it
mm-hmm.
when we're becoming more and more understanding of what the role is, whether you're an
Yes,
immersive classroom or not.
right, right. I think that feeling that you get when you're doing it in a gen ed class is like, well, there's some sort of like internal conflict that you have where it's like, well, I'm supposed to be interpreting classroom content, what's happening in the classroom, but I have a minute right now, and my student asks me a question.
Right.
You can obviously direct them to talk to the to the teacher, but there's also like there's a lot of really nuanced things that happen during an interpretation. You don't know if you're the person who interpreted it incorrectly, and so the student didn't understand it. You don't know if the student has no foundational understanding of the content that's been like directed towards them. You
Right.
don't know if the teacher slipped up and said the wrong page number. Like there are so many different things that come into that where if you say, go ask the teacher and they get in trouble for it, there's a whole lot of trust in everything involved in this situation where
Right.
you have to create a safe space for the kid to say, I didn't understand you. I didn't understand the teacher. I don't understand the content. I don't know how to sign this. I don't know what's going on.
Mhm.
Uh, any number of things. And the simple solution usually is, well, go talk to the teacher and I'm happy to interpret for you. I used to do that. I'd say, oh, I'm willing to interpret for you if you want to go over there and talk to them about it. Depending on the situation, that might be the right choice.
Mhm.
Right.
But if you don't know your student well, if they don't know how to ask a question, if they don't know if the teacher was being sarcastic, if they don't know how to read their paper, then what are you really doing to how are you being an educational interpreter in that moment? I
Right.
don't know. I
All
don't know. I
depends
guess it's
on age, situation, and all. I mean,
yes,
it's so
yes,
nuanced, like you said.
yes. And I work, to be clear, I work in second, third, and fourth grade.
Ah,
So my students are lower upper L age, and so there is a lot of dependence training and independence training. Like this is how we lead from being dependent on an adult who knows your native language to being an independent student who can ask questions when they don't understand.
it's
But
huge.
anyway, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. The best
Mhm.
job I ever had.
We just flap our hands around. I don't know what you're talking about.
I make it up every day.
It's so do I.
I'm a bullshit artist. The kids, they're like, "How do you know how to do all this
It's
stuff?" And I just say,
beautiful.
I don't know. I don't know
We don't.
anything. I
We
just
don't know
make it up."
anything. We do.
Anyway,
It makes it fun.
sorry.
Do you
It
have anything
is.
to add to that, Rachel, or before?
I mean, you mentioned too before about, some interpreters might bristle at the thought of tutoring at XYZ of the extra stuff that maybe K-12 interpreters get involved in doing in order to make sure that the students are receiving that communication, receiving that content that's happening in the classroom in a functionally equivalent way, right? And I remember too just coming in and maybe being pulled into sub for Seth in the classroom and getting the, oh, well, you don't, if you don't feel comfortable, please tell me, And I remember almost was like, oh, is this I didn't realize that that was a dynamic of, um, some people really feeling uncomfortable with that. And as like a newbie, I was like, I'll try anything. Just give me a little guidance, give me a little training, maybe a little modeling, and I'm happy to try it. And if I don't feel like I'm doing it justice, then I can communicate that with you. Um, but yeah, it is understandable because I feel like sometimes I work with interpreters in a bunch of different settings in education specifically, they might think that they're not what they're doing isn't tutoring. They might not know put
Right.
together that they are doing something that they are. So when someone says it, they're like, "Oh, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that." Well, it's like number one, it might be okay and appropriate, and number two, it's just that's what it's called, right? And that's okay. I think that kind of comes from not wanting to step out of role to kind of feel almost like this defensiveness about it. But yeah, there are like, Seth was saying, like, I primarily am a mainstream interpreter in elementary school right now with like younger kids. And depending on if the student has typical language development, is deaf of deaf, or has severe language deprivation, that question to the interpreter is going to be handled quite differently, right? Whereas like maybe the um, not language deprived student, I can say, okay, we'll ask the teacher. We can ask the
Right.
teacher. I will interpret for you, depending. There's some exceptions, obviously, to that. And then, as far as like severely language deprived student, if we're in the middle of math and the teacher's like, okay, what's this answer? And the kids start raising their hand, and I'm sitting there interpreting what all the kids are saying. The student might just be looking at me, not knowing what's going on because the following of the conversational turns is just not where they're at yet.
Right.
So, kind of narrowing that classroom per se into, okay, maybe it's just the two of us right now. And I'm looking at you
Yes.
directly and I'm saying, hey, this plus this equal, pointing at the board, touching the board, or using a board by me and having the student do it, interact with the student, and then, oh, the student's caught up. We can actually have the student raise their hand when everybody else is raising their hand and participate and feel what it feels like to participate in that classroom. That would be functional equivalency. Even though the student isn't necessarily hearing all the answers of the other students and the other students being wrong, right? You know, we just worked that out between the two of us. And they got the information and they got the content. So now we're able to move along with the rest of the class rather than having the student doing a whole lesson and then realizing the student wasn't able to comprehend something in the middle, or they were overwhelmed completely by what was going on in the classroom with like 25 kids. So it looks really different, but with students with language deprivation, it might feel weird to be like, okay, I heard what you said, teacher, but I'm going to go on not a tangent, but we're going to parallel you in just a little bit of a different way in order to make this accessible to this student in this moment. Now, in a perfect world, and I've experienced this, I've had, TODs or other deaf people come in the room and supply that so I can interpret, and they supply that extra interaction in order to get the student there. But there's days, even for me, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Um, and then I'm by myself with the student or with two students that have very different needs, right? So um, even for those that do have those resources, sometimes it happens where you need, as the educational interpreter, to maybe just adjust a little bit to make sure that we're all on the same page.
And if
Love that response. Love that response. Really
Seth
good.
approves, nice.
I approve.
He approves. I'm gonna be the devil's advocate. I don't really give a shit, but I'm gonna say the thing.
You know, he
Who
needs some
the
advocacy. You know, the devil needs some advocacy in
he
this
does,
moment,
he does.
please.
She does. No,
She does.
who the hell are you to do all that? That's like my immediate response is, do you have teacher training? Do you actually know what you should be doing? We're just the interpreter. And I'm just saying this because this is like what we've been taught and or what other people may argue. Um, do you have child development classes under your belt? Are you doing the right thing? Should you interpret all the wrong answers? Well, ideally, yes, but we can't right now because we have to like, is this all intuitive? Does that lady have the same intuition? Does that interpreter over there like it's so nuanced and so hard to teach and explain. I agree and I get it and I hear you. How is this how do we how do we do it right and make sure everyone kind of does it right? I feel like there's so many great educational interpreters out there who follow their belly and they're like, I know, and they know how to do that. And then there's a smaller pocket where you're like, they're doing it. It's not right. It's too much, too little, whatever. Any thoughts on that?
So I think that our students need to be exposed to all kinds of interpreters, including
Nice.
people who might not necessarily share the same opinions about, I think what Rachel was kind of describing is what we call like an interactive interpreting model.
Yes.
And that's fine. I think that if you are uncomfortable in a situation where you don't think the attitude is you're coming into something and say a teacher of the deaf says this is what how I want you to interpret for a student, and the interpreter says no, that's not how I interpret. Well, then you have to come up because no doesn't really fly very well in a collaborative space, and so we as kind of a team always try and find, there are some of those smaller groups of interpreters who say, I'm not going to do that, and that's fine. Let's find a better space for them to work and do the thing that they want to do.
Right.
And um, in terms of whether or not like it's okay to do that, I think it
Right.
is. I think it's absolutely okay. And not only just because it's kind of outlined in the EIPA standard practice papers, but we also see the results.
Yeah.
And we see students who are growing really rapidly, like a year's worth of growth in 3 to 4 months.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen because somebody said, I'm not going to do this.
Right.
That happens because people like Rachel say, I am willing to try. And then we see the results, and then we got them addicted to it. Now they can't stop doing it. And then we got hooked, and we bring it in, and we've got a whole posse of people who are all on
Uh,
board.
and I will say, just a side note, what you're describing is if we were to send kids to deaf schools, which we know this. We know that immersion, that slowing down, that explaining, like of course, ideal. That's not what happens. Kids are in these schools. So here we are. And ideally, having all deaf tutors, all like ideally, of course, that is
Mhm.
not reality. So what do we do? Yeah.
Right. And I would say, like, when someone says, like, well, who are you to decide or who are you to teach?
Mm-hmm.
My thought process when I'm going through these, like that interaction, like I say in math class, right? I'm still taking what the teacher is giving to me
Right.
and using what the teacher is saying. I'm basically copying what the teacher is saying and maybe doing. A lot of times that doesn't always work for deaf students, specifically with language deprivation. But they are using a lot of manipulatives and visual aids in class. And so I might be able to just do exactly kind of what the teacher is doing. I'm never really pulling anything out of my ass and
Right.
saying, I'm going to teach you this right now. And the way I don't have the confidence to do that. Or, I just really, even when I'm in the room, the immersion room, it's stuff that's given to me to do. Like, I want
Right.
you to do this, right? And
Yeah.
again, not everybody has that person that can say, I want you to do this with these students. However, I feel like there's a difference between teaching and going above and or way far outside of the role versus I'm still doing the same thing as the teacher, giving the same information as the teacher is giving and creating the same environment as the teacher is. Yeah, I'm interpreting it
You're
right.
actually doing the
I'm
full job versus just like throwing words at this kid and being
right.
like, good luck.
Right.
Like,
I'm basically creating a little microcosm of something
yeah.
that they can access. So it's not something that I'm just doing willy-nilly. It's very carefully done. And but I still understand why people are like, well, you're still
Of
kind of going
course.
off script. Well, you know, I can't sit here with this student and say, Jamie has 3 apples and he has 3 friends. How many apples can he give to each friend, right? I can't just sign that to a student. It might look more like, oh, Jamie or the boy, Jamie, has 3 apples. How many apples does he have?
Yes.
Right? We have to build that.
Yes.
And it's not necessarily changing the question at all. It's interpreting the question in a way and making sure that
Right.
the student understands at each level or each point in the question in order to do the math. And then guess what? They're able to do it. And I
Right.
don't have to give them, and I'm not giving them any answers, right? I mean,
Right.
there might be times where we have a worksheet of all these problems, and I model the first one, the first two,
Yes. Yes.
right? Not on a test, but we model them, and then oh, they're able to do it, right? Rather than just giving them the paper saying, "Here you go, I'll interpret the question." Some students might be okay with that. It like might be able to access that. a lot of students can't or
This
aren't
is
yet there.
Mhm.
this is just speaking to my 22-year-old heart who went solo into a K-12 and interpreted with one person, and we're in middle school, and the concept of the word soil like didn't even make sense. I was like, how do I back all the way? Okay, so I got to start back here. Oh, you're gonna keep going, but I'm okay. I'm gonna st I know that feeling. That's
Mhm.
why I would imagine most people, interpreters who are faced with these type of students, feel it because they're like, shit, you don't even know what the word flower means. So we can't do
Mhm.
photosynthesis if we don't even know flower yet. Like,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
we feel it and we know it. We just, and I can think I didn't know what to do with it. So I tried my best. Man,
Well, that's all you can do is try your best. It's a fourth agreement. All you can do is try your best. No
it's
less,
true.
no more. Otherwise, and things might still fail. It's fine. You can always tell yourself you did your best. But gosh, yeah, just those gaps within those students. Like I work specifically for the past 5 years with language deprived students, and that's kind of a term I think that's getting thrown around a lot. But we see it. Like I think that there's probably any educational interpreter who works or and maybe watches this podcast can be like, oh yeah, yeah, I know,
They know.
I know exactly what you're
Oh
talking
yeah.
about. I know which student exactly, and they're in third grade and they're trying to learn multiplication. They don't have any sort of common core setup, concrete representational abstract. If they don't have anything below that abstract, there's no way you're going to get them there. There's
Right.
no way unless they guess it right. And even
Right.
that, the foundational, like the concrete stuff, means using manipulatives. So if you can identify a student's language needs, then you should reach out. One, you should reach out to somebody who knows
That's
and
number
can try and
one.
help.
Mhm.
Like
Yes.
be like, I can't, I don't know where my student's at.
Yeah.
And there might not be that many resources for you, say, if you're working on an island, but most schools have an SLP and you can try and bounce ideas off of them. Speech and language pathologists for a long time have been demonized in the interpreter community because of their focus on speech, or even that there's speech in their title.
Right.
But the reality is that they're language experts, or they are skilled in the world of language. And if you can work with them to try and do a diagnostic of some sort with your students who have language deprivation, you can get closer. And that's
Yeah.
like the goal, right? We get closer and closer to filling those gaps in order to make sure that our students are successful. Because when our students feel successful, they feel great and they love school and they want to come there, they feel safe.
Right.
And as much as we talk about back and forth about how we do our jobs, the reality is that we got to make sure that our kids are safe. We have to make sure that our students are learning. And if that's not why you're doing the job, if you're doing it for a paycheck, you should find a different job because it doesn't pay well.
Right. I was
I'm
gonna say,
sorry.
then you're in the
That's
wrong
for sure.
spot because you have to be there for heart.
Yeah.
Um, I'll put it in the chat here just so you can remember the notes. But we talked about like tangible things for
Yeah.
people to go home with, like the concept of, and I talked about it with Anna on a podcast like way back at the beginning of more interactive interpreter style, and you guys talked about that. But there's some other stuff that you guys do that is really cool. And it doesn't have to be just immersive classroom or self-contained or any particular classroom. And it probably maybe, but it probably won't be the senior 12th
Yeah.
grade student. This will probably, we all know elementary, but
Yeah,
yeah,
and you never know. I've worked with older
right,
students who have
right,
language deprivation, right? And
Mhm.
I've had to use some of these strategies in order to have them part of the classroom and, taking advantage of all the knowledge that they can get from it as long as they have, an interpreting style that bridges that gap, right? But yeah, we
Mhm.
talked about the, interactive interpreting style. I mentioned about like the Jamie has three apples and how many apples? Three, kind of building it. If the student says a random number, you can go back and fix that part, fix it, but like, be more visual about like I have apples here. One, two, three, right? Um, there's a lot of that. And I also too, depending on the student, sometimes, they a lot of times teachers will put the students at the front of the class, at least in my experience. I know sometimes there's teachers that kind of are like, I want them over there. Can't you guys, I don't want the interpreter in the front. Well, really often that I've experienced, they've been in the front. And sometimes the student, that might mean this either I go up to the student and I sit by their desk during a lesson or during, um, you know, a, a collaborative type math lesson or something like that. Or, here, bring a whiteboard and you're going to sit close to me, closer to the board,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
That's like one thing that I use just to get us on like a level of we're here, we're gonna work together to, get through this math lesson, right? And using visual manipulatives like the tiles and showing and like there's been times where like the TOD has been in the room um, to uh, do language support, teaching, co-teaching in the room, and bringing out like the ruler and showing it and cutting it and showing it that it moves and that two of these equals this, um, and whiteboards. I've used so many whiteboards.
Yep.
It's constant. It's like, okay, bring your whiteboard out time. And no matter what, even for things like reading and stuff like that, very beneficial. Drawing pictures of what we're talking about. And like I mentioned before, like the group participation, encouraging that because once they see that they can be a part of the classroom and that they're getting these answers right and that they're following, they'll more likely be engaged and glean so much more from it. And yeah, those are the kinds of things that I use at least in the classroom, um, um, both in the mainstream and immersion classroom.
Yeah. One strategy, I guess, that I use because I don't just interpret in the immersion room. Like, it does offer me the opportunity to provide ASL specific services for students who are out in Gen Ed. So they may have two interpreters in their classroom if I'm
Mm,
available. So
nice.
they'll have an interpreter who does transliteration, and then I will take some of the ASL kids, depending on what they want to do. See, this is also a learning thing where you're like, oh, you're in second grade. Which would you prefer? Would you prefer to watch ASL or would you like to watch
Right.
someone who's transliterating? And a lot of times they don't know.
Of
And
course.
we as the adults definitely know because we sit them at opposite sides of the classrooms and they pick who they're going to watch and then we move them. You know what I mean? It takes maybe 2 weeks and then we figure it out. And like, oh, okay, well, all these kids are watching this person watching that person. But
Nice.
my specific strategy comes to voicing. So, there are some interpreters who say, like, I voice everything. If my kids' hands are in the air, I voice it.
Mm,
Mhm.
And for specifically a language deprived student, that doesn't really teach them anything. It
right.
teaches them that they can get in trouble for interrupting the
To say
class.
it
But if,
teaches them to shut up, I would imagine.
yes,
Yes.
yes. And one of the huge sort of pushes, maybe, I don't know, 10 years ago, was this theory of mind, like this idea of the theory of mind, where like a lot of our students who are language deprived don't have an internal monologue. They have an
Right.
external monologue. And if you voice it all the time, essentially you're telling them that you don't want to hear what they think.
Mm,
And that's a huge bummer. So, like, when it comes to voicing for a language deprived student, a lot of times I talk them through it. Are you talking about math? Are you talking about something that's going on at home? Are you talking about this? Are you talking about that? And then we kind of tease it out and like, all right, well, sometimes I do say like, we're doing math, so focus up, bud. Or, um, I don't know. There's just been several different interpreters who've come up to me and be like, why don't you voice when your kids start signing? It's like because I want to know what they're trying to say. I had a student who would, whenever something excited would happen, like anything exciting would happen, and they wanted to talk about it, they would always say Santa Claus down the chimney, Santa Claus, Dad cooked breakfast, Santa Claus down the chimney, pancakes, they were delicious, Santa Claus went down the chimney,
oh,
Christmas, uh, Dad, Dad dropped me off at school. Because Santa Claus is an exciting thing that they anchored on. And
Mhm.
then if I were to sit there and voice all that, one, I'd sound insane, and two, I would do a huge disservice to that student. That's a type of oppression in my um, opinion.
yeah.
So the strategy, I guess, the thing that I think that a lot of people should take away is really try to look at what the kids are trying to say, and don't always voice it. Especially like when Rachel's doing her interactive interpreting
Yes.
model, don't sit there and talk about it and then be voicing it unless like a teacher's over there and wants to know what's going on.
Mhm.
Um, talk it through with them. And if they get the right answer, great. If they get the wrong answer, great. They tell them, like, if they did the work in their head with you visually, and it's time for them to respond by raising their hand, regardless if they're right or wrong,
Mm-hmm.
you've done the work, you've done the interaction. They have an answer. Have them respond, and then you can see what happens next. And even if the kids are wrong, they love it. I mean, kids are plastic. They're very flexible, and when it comes to emotions and stuff, they're very good at expressing them. Um, yeah, I don't know. I guess like big strategies like that, like
Yeah.
restrain yourself a little bit when voicing, and
Or it
like
feels
Rachel
very
said,
common sense,
doesn't
but
it? Doesn't it?
sadly, that's not always the case. You
I,
mentioned emotional, or I like this next section we have here of Seth, you're good at this. And I've been told you're good at this from Anna, who you work with. And I know you personally, and you're a funny person. And
I try
although
so hard.
another, huh?
I try so hard.
You try so hard. It's not
Oh,
funny, but it's funny. No,
okay.
I'm joking. But as a male, that's another thing to point out. There's more and more males in the K-12, AK, or even just in interpreting more so. I feel
Where?
I'm noticing more. I don't know. I don't know. Somewhere.
Yeah.
But having a male for a male student who's in fifth grade is different than cute Rachel who shows up. Like it's just different how they feel. So I know you've got a lot of cool things you do to make the kids be kids, help the kids be a kid because
Yeah.
it's important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I worked at a youth camp for years, so
Oh, well, you got
a
the
lot of
upper
that
hand.
I called Captain Fun because I'll usually like
Oh
show up in
boy.
somebody's classroom and then I'll like make a bunch of jokes and stuff just to like tell a teacher something and then get all the kids riled up and leave. But no, so a lot of the stuff that I do is modeling how to tell a joke, modeling how to have an argument, modeling
Yes.
how to like insult somebody. So like you'll get kids who may be moderately language deprived, but that might also have autism spectrum disorder, and they don't understand social cues. So they'll be like, "He's making fun of me," and I'm like, "Well, no, they're not making fun of you. They're just saying they like your shirt." So the ownness I always do is I put it on the student. So I don't say like I'm going to solve your problems for you, or I'm going to teach you how to do this joke. We're going to set it up, or we're going to have this argument. I always say like, well, what did he say, or what did she say, and what did you say back, and just kind of modeling through it. And I'm like, well, you can say I'm sorry, or you can say no, I don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, we have Pokemon cards,
Mm,
and I can't wait to sign Pokemon cards. I
I
don't know,
know.
I don't know
There's
how you
probably
guys sign Pokemon cards,
you
but
should know the sign for Pokemon. Is there a sign for Pokemon?
I do Pokemon.
There's very many.
Oh, I see.
There's
I
plenty.
see.
Uh,
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, because of the Pokeballs and all that. But anyway, so like a student say, for example, I've had to get out my phone and eBay to make sure that the kids are trading equitably. But they're excited about it, so we don't want to take it away. So there will be a kid who says has like a $3 Pokemon card, and another one has a $30 Pokemon card. And the $30 kid wants the $3 one, so they're gonna trade. And it's like, well, no, like you have to know that your card is worth more than theirs, but they're like, I really want it. So you have to say you can say yes and you can say no. Like even those sorts of inequities, those sorts of small pockets of socialization, you can give kids permission to say no. One of the biggest things that I can recommend for anybody who works with children is when you make a mistake, you need to apologize.
Mm,
Mm-hmm.
If you make a mistake when you're interpreting and your interpretations through interpersonal conflicts, like in those situations, I'm not always right. I might be completely wrong. That kid might not have stolen that from the other kid. Somebody might have stolen it and put it in their backpack, and I accused them of it. There's a number of different interpersonal conflicts that happen on a daily basis, and I'm not always right. And when something goes wrong, I apologize. And I don't just say, oh, sorry. I sit them
you
down and I give them a
you as in
heartfelt
Seth.
apology.
You as
Me
in
as in
Seth of
Seth.
like I tried to and I was wrong. You as in
Exactly.
Seth. Okay.
Me as an adult, I
Nice.
always
Yes.
apologize and I try my best to do it because it humanizes you, it
Yep.
creates a bond with your student, and it gives them permission to apologize too.
Yeah.
Because sometimes kids do things wrong and they don't want to apologize. But if
Right.
they know that they can, that it's okay, that I've had kids in tears crying their eyes out because they had stolen something for the first time.
Right.
You know what I mean? They'd never stolen a thing before in their life, and they did it this one time. And imagine if I would have raked them over the coals. They would have they probably wouldn't steal anymore, but they wouldn't trust me.
Right.
They wouldn't tell me things anymore. So my one of my big recommendations is that if you're operating in a capacity where you are modeling for students social norms, apologize when you mess up because it makes a world of this difference. I've seen my relationship change with students from contentious to I don't want to oversell it, but like okay, it,
Right.
with a simple
Oh,
apology.
Mm.
and you talk about like sports rules.
Mhm.
Boys do this, and not to gender, but like you can
No,
say you're an idiot back. Like
Yeah.
you
yeah,
aren't always remaining this nice. I follow the school rule. Obviously, you're not telling people to do terrible things, but
yeah.
like
I give
be a
them
kid.
lighters and matches. I give them
Yes,
beers. It's
be a
great.
kid. Go
Yeah,
fuck. No, I'm just joking.
yeah,
But no, but you like let kids be kids, and they aren't getting that incidental kid learning too
Mhm.
much in a public school. If they were in a deaf school, that's where they're gaining all those. And so, yeah, you're being that for them. Yeah, that's huge.
yeah. I'm a big kid at heart,
Right.
so I always tell people we work a lot with parents, and I always tell people that adults are just older kids because parents
Seriously.
are probably the worst part of our job.
Yep.
Sorry if there are parents out there who disagree, but they're the worst part of our job.
Mhm.
There are two of them for usually for every one kid, and
They're typically a
they
pain in the ass. The kids are the best part.
yeah, huge pain in the ass. So all of you parents out there, be nice to your educators
Right.
because we do it not for money,
Right.
clearly. Um, anyway,
Yeah.
that's kind of what I had for strategies when working with the what do you call
Like
it?
the
The
social emotional
severely
part.
language. Yeah, the social emotional part is a lot of modeling, and it
It,
is saying you can call him a jerk, you can call him
yes.
a dumbass. You guys can go back and forth, and if you guys feel hurt inside, then you need to say that. You need to say you hurt my feelings, and I don't want you to do that again. Usually, it's like the kid will be annoying another kid, and he'll look at him and go, "Stop!" And I say, "Stop what? Stop what?
Name it.
Stop touching my chair. Why? Why do
Mm.
you want him to stop touching your chair? Because it's annoying." I said, "Tell him that. Don't tell me that. Tell him that.
Nice.
Stop touching my chair. It's annoying." And that kid can be like, "No." I can say, "You can say no. You can say yes. You can say no. I don't care. You guys solve it. Figure it out."
I love
But
that. It helps. And this is overgeneralization. I don't know. You're a funny guy. You're a cool guy. You're a guy.
Mhm.
I don't know
yeah,
if is that any different, Rachel? If we go in there, it feels this is I don't know. I'm way gendering. You're a mothery role, a teachery role. It feel and the guys are just that have fun. Like I don't. I'm totally stereotyping, but
I
I don't
mean,
know.
there's strategies that Seth has used in order to connect with students that, students with language deprivation, they, feel safe with certain adults because they can
Right.
understand certain adults and they understand them and they know they're not going to get, in trouble for no reason, right? Um, and I've used like, Seth has a lot of jokes, there's a lot of visual jokes that happen in sign language. And so I, kind of use that to kind of get on a level with students that maybe that aren't like the same gender as me. And it's not like the whole class, I'm just joking around with the kid, right?
Right.
It's more of like, oh, you better look at, not look at me, but like, they might do something and I'll be like, oh, what are you doing? Kind of like, I'm watching you,
yeah.
and I'm never, as a like with me, I don't typically, especially with the students that I was working with all day last year, I could kind of step back a little bit. But there were times where the kids and the boys were yelling these jokes like chicken jockey and saying all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there interpreting, and the student would be like, huh? And I'm like, I think it's a joke. Hold on, let me look it up. You know what I mean? Kind of. So then oh, the next day, maybe he uses that joke,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Um, so it looks, I know for me, it has looked a little different just because I've been mostly in the mainstream classrooms and depending on what student I worked with, but like even the language deprived students, we have our own little inside jokes that we have, or um, you know, just to get on a level of, we are working together and I'm not some scary adult,
Mhm.
or someone that's going to just like rat you out. Like, yeah, I do all maybe some other things that might be seen maybe sometimes as out of my role because people don't understand or haven't experienced, working in K-12 or with language deprived students. But I'm not going and being like, okay, well, I just heard your conversation and you just called him an idiot, so I'm gonna go tell. Like
Right.
that's
Right. It does break a layer of trust because what
right.
other adult is sitting with another hearing kid all day up in their business?
Hmm.
We have to remember, obviously, safety of the kids in the school, obviously. But yeah, you have to remember that we're in their business more than other kids get an adult in their
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
somehow we've made it almost an hour. So
Holy cow.
I know. Any last things you want to add or things you do or want people to know or anything?
I would like to add something that at least my district or I'm piloting a little bit with a TOD is data collection.
Hmm.
Um, as a way to drive your decision making on like interpreting decisions
You are data collecting as an
as
interpreter,
yeah.
in collaboration with the teacher.
Yes, with
Lovely.
guidance, like I said, again, not everybody has that. There's ways to possibly informally do that just for your own, you have your instincts, you have your experience, but like what's happening, and, for example, like I've done, picking a 10-minute interpreted piece that the student or the teacher is doing, or it's a video that they're showing, right? And then answer or asking three questions to that student directly.
Mm,
Right? And just seeing what they, and sometimes you'll notice, oh, the student's able to answer yes and no questions very easily,
mm,
true or false questions or open-ended questions, or when I interpret it this way, or if I, oh, maybe today my interpretation was a little bit more XYZ. You're able to kind of guide your interpretation based off of that. Now, right now, it's like for me, I've kind of just been collecting the data and kind of like sending it to the TOD. I haven't really looked at what it looks like myself, but that's something that is becoming a conversation, I will say, especially with like including interpreters in IEPs, not as the
yes.
interpreter interpreting the IEP, but as a member sitting in that circle and having,
Having data.
things to say. Yeah, data, and yeah, like, people always think of, oh, you know, is a student looking at you or not, right? But we can't actually glean that by number one, we're watching, we're interpreting, so we're already doing something, so we might miss what the student's even doing.
Hmm.
And two, we know that deaf people have all the peripheral, and kids are adaptable. They'll find a way to, if they are able to understand the interpreter in there, it's a smooth process. They'll be able to get that information, but you might not see them looking at you, right? So
Right.
yeah, there's people think of that. That's the first thing that comes to mind when you're commenting on the interpreter in the room. But what about, oh, does the student grab me to have a conversation with a hearing peer in the room, right? There's so many things that we can comment on. There are things that we don't, right? But there are things that we can comment on in during an IEP, whereas like maybe sometimes interpreters are asked to interpret their own IEPs
Yep.
and give input, which is a dual role, and that's really a sticky situation. Um, or they're not asked anything at all, like they might be sitting there. So, just thinking about y us being a part of the education team, I think is something that I think is becoming more and more talked about.
Hmm.
And not just saying it, but like actually showing and including us. So that's just something that I wanted to put out there.
Yeah, I
Um,
like the gathering of data because the teacher's not going to do it in terms of the interpretation and the language.
Mhm.
The other person's not going to, maybe a deaf person could come
Mhm.
in and be that tutor, but right, you're doing the job. It'd be
Mhm.
really good information. I like that.
Yeah. And there's some discussion on whether or not, well, okay, well, interpreters are gathering data. They should be paid, you know,
Hmm.
maybe more for
Are
doing
you
that.
a professional?
Right. And
Wait a minute.
What?
however, there's
What?
all these things that, people say to that, right? And I think it's just kind of trying to figure that out to make it so, yes, we are professionals in the room, and we do collect data and we do some of these other things that maybe people don't think that we do,
Right.
or that we think that we shouldn't do, which again, in a perfect world, XYZ, right? But I don't know. So.
Yeah.
No, I
Seth.
think you're doing a great job, Rachel. I think that this data collection thing is huge, and like the one of the really big things I think about the data collection thing specifically is if we provide data during IEPs, that means that we become more than just like a service provider, become a related service provider that has to bill for Medicaid.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's a cricket in my room. I don't understand.
I
But
can't hear him.
yeah, but we have to bill for Medicaid, which is a whole other thing because in terms of an IEP, the most amount of minutes usually on a gen ed student IEP in a typical deaf ed world, the most amount of minutes is with an interpreter
Of
in
course.
a gen ed setting. And so we would have to bill out every day for like 6.5 hours towards Medicaid, which is just a lot to do. But if we meant me getting paid like I was like a deaf ed teacher, I'd do it.
As I say, so
Oh,
you
heck yeah,
actually
I'd
want
do
to
it.
be paid for amount of the work that you do? Like, come on.
What?
I
Give us a
know.
little
Weird.
extra time during the day to do it. You
Yeah,
Prep.
never know.
I
You
Be
never know.
prepared.
you
Yeah.
are insane. You're out of
This
your
is
fucking mind. Fucking
madness.
mind. Yeah,
I love it though.
yeah, I know, right? We love our jobs, that's for sure. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it, right?
I know.
Um, Gotta have
I
a
can
big
hear
heart
the
for it.
cricket now.
Yeah.
Oh, can you?
I
Jiminy,
love it.
get out of here. Go home to your
Um,
wife or husband. I don't know.
right, right.
Yeah.
Do you want to wrap up? What would be the deaf owned businesses you want to highlight? There's a few. Who do you want to talk about? Rachel, who do you have?
I have Ellen Mansfield. I think on Instagram it's Ellen Mansfield Artist. She's a Davia ceramicist and painter. And I happen to be a ceramicist myself. I work with clay. And so I followed her for a while and I just find her work really awesome. It's like kind of, in my opinion, a little unique. I haven't seen a lot of people using the motifs and imagery from Devia and incorporating it into sculpture work and like tile work and such. So I thought that was wonderful and I wanted to highlight her today.
Nice. And Seth, who do you want to highlight?
All right. So I had to turn off the microphone because this cricket's insane. So I have Arena Burke out of Indianapolis. She is a photographer. So I highly recommend that you utilize her services. And then my friend Abbey, who we work with, she runs an Airbnb and she's an educator. So check out her house. It's here in West Michigan. Um, Last but not least, I don't know, this isn't a deaf owned business, but adopt a deaf dog. Okay.
There you go. Hey,
It is the best. I have two. They're amazing. If you want to live and breathe, ASL in your daily life in a somewhat diminished capacity, you're never far away from a deaf dog. All right, adopt them. They're fantastic. They make great dogs.
I love that. Yeah, you were worried about your dogs barking, but we got a cricket interrupting us. I love it.
Yeah. What's the
Can't
deal with
win.
that? No.
I appreciate you both. I think we could have
Yeah.
gone for a lot longer. There's a lot that we zoomed through that how do you even talk about every day that what you do? It's so hard to make it make sense in English for an hour.
Mhm.
And I hope people gathered, I guarantee someone got some sort of nugget or at least validation or um, ideas and or sometimes people are like, what if I say something that pisses someone off? I'm like, good. Like that's the whole point of talking and communicating and doing a podcast. I don't want to make people mad, but I do want to like spark some thought, spark some feeling just to get the conversation going and hopefully in the right direction. So I appreciate you both for your wisdom and your time.
Yeah.
Um, Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And I'm happy to come back sometime if you want
Yes,
more
please.
lewd comments.
Yeah.
I always do. Only if the cricket's here.
Yes.
All right, I'll bring him.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank
All right,
you.
thank you.